Possibly the most controversial inclusions in the Alien series are the Engineers, the beings introduced in Ridley Scott's film Prometheus. First discovered by doctors Elizabeth Shaw and Charlie Holloway, the Engineers were believed to be the creators of human life on Earth. Shaw and Holloway had researched pictograms from archaeological digs from all over the Earth from different civilizations and different time periods, all with a common depiction of men worshipping giant beings pointing to the stars. These pictograms were interpreted as maps and as an invitation from the Engineers to the only possible life-sustaining moon in the depicted system, Life Viable 223. The installation found on this moon served to further Shaw and Holloway's theories, but the mission soon turned into a nightmare, leading to the deaths of all members of Project Prometheus, save for Shaw, along with the android David 8. Among all their discoveries, the most interesting may be the Engineer's ship, instantly familiar to fans of Alien. Within, the pilot, the space jockey, a subject of curiosity ever since 1979. The unexpected answer to this mystery was that this giant being was an engineer in an elaborate biosuit. But is this the case when it comes to the space jockey seen in the crashed ship on LV-426? A mere few decades separates the events of Prometheus and Alien, while the deceased jockey on LV-426 is fossilized. How ancient are these engineers and their technology? Could their technology have been replicated from or based on beings that already existed? How much do we really know about the Engineers, these beings that have made such a significant impact on the Alien series? Where can we separate what is theory and what is disclosed as, for lack of a better word, official? The best starting point is the Weyland-Yutani report by S.D. Perry, currently the most reliable encyclopedia of sorts relating to the Alien series as a whole. This is the report's description of the Engineers. The race stood nearly 2.5 meters tall, but otherwise appeared nearly human in terms of features, musculature, and overall symmetry. Differences were fewer than similarities. The living specimen directly encountered on LV-223 was exceptionally pallid and with a blue-gray tone to its skin. It also appeared to be hairless. Whether this was a natural evolution or the result of exceptionally long stasis period is unknown. The design of its eyes were notable, complex, sparing multiple lenses. The Engineer's eyes appeared all black, and the skull formation included a notably high cranial vault, but otherwise the Engineer could be the prototype for humanity. The report also addresses the connections to the Nostromo crew's discoveries on LV-426, relating to the biosuit technology to the space jockey. As no working examples of the Engineer's helmets exists, we have been unable thus far to reverse engineer its components and unravel this aspect of their obviously superior technology. The base material of the suit is unknown. There appeared to be no corrosion or deterioration despite its advanced age. That the suit could be constructed from a self-repairing organic material has not been ruled out. When the crew of the Nostromo first encountered the derelict ship on LV-426, they mistakenly believed that the envirosuit/armor was actually the corpse of a hitherto unknown species. Taking the report at its word, then it is at least the belief of the company that the jockey was in fact an engineer. But something to consider. The Weyland-Yutani report was published in 2012, shortly after the release of Prometheus. Obviously, it lacks further explorations of the engineer species that would relate to Alien Covenant and other extended universe material. Of more recent years, setting writing for Alien the Role-Playing Game by Andrew E.C. Gasca has proved illuminating. Here is an overview of the Engineers as written in the RPG. The ruins of their massive necropoli and pyramidal structures are spread across the stars. The sophistication of their fossilized biotechnology mystifies explorers, while their megalithic stone statues and busts bear testament to their artistic and architectural superiority. But who are they? If the company has its way, you'll never find out. Hieroglyphic tablets unearthed on Tanaka 5 call them Ossians. The decoded derelict beacon on LV-426 made reference to the Melekak. Whatever they call themselves, to modern human praedomorph, they are simply known as the Engineers. Dr. Elizabeth Shaw coined the term when she and Dr. Charles Holloway discovered pictograms on many of Earth's continents depicting giant beings pointing toward the stars. Believing the beings to have engineered humanity, she dubbed them accordingly. That star configuration turned out to be a star map which led the Prometheus mission to a distant moon and the ruins of an engineer outpost. Whatever they found there was erased from the archives. The destination of the Prometheus was classified and all but forgotten. But stray transmissions picked up by company satellites confirmed the existence of the beings. Over the decades, covert corporate scientists have made attempts to classify them. As the first remains of their kind were discovered at the helms of their dead ships, some have labeled them as Mundus Gubernave, or universal pilot. Like the misnomer Internecivus raptus, murderous thief, that is sometimes associated with xenomorph XX121, that classification in and of itself is incorrect. There is no pilot genus to draw upon. The late Dr. Shaw's scientific notes that were recovered in a garbled signal sent after the loss of the Prometheus provide the most shocking revelation about these engineers. Their DNA is human. They predate us, they are us, and we come from them. The rediscovery of Shaw's notes has led to a more scientific name for these giants, homogenitors, or creator of man. The little more that is known about them has been gleaned from several extrasolar archaeological digs discovered within the past 3 years as the frontier has advanced into the unknown. No living engineers are known to exist, and the few xenoanthropologists aware of them believe they died out thousands of years ago. Their passing is marked by their abandoned citadels, derelict ships, and their biogenetic and evolutionary experiments. What is also clear from Dr. Shaw's transmissions is that even though they created humanity, at some point millennia ago they decided to undo their creation, attempting to wipe out the Earth and start again. Physical traits. The engineers were colossal beings. While some fossilized evidence places them as much as 4.5 meters tall, most agree they averaged at 2.7 meters in height. On first appearance, their bodies seemed biomechanical in nature, with a bulbous, truncated head. This is, in fact, a removable living pressure suit that melds with the engineer's body, with the head actually being a helmet of some type. These living suits and helmets have only been found dead and fossilized over millennia of disuse. Underneath their strange garb, the engineers are statuesque. They have hairless, chiseled physiques with translucent blue-white skin, heavy brows, high noses, and large, glassy black eyes. They are both beautiful and powerful in appearance. While they were once believed to be all male, there is now evidence to suggest that female engineers exist as well. Dr. Shaw theorized that the females operated in leadership capacity while the males assumed soldier, artisan, and philosopher roles. But there is no evidence to support this. Females are equally hairless and just as dangerous. Conjectural analysis. Some theories suggest there are different breeds or castes of engineers with physical alternatives bred into them, thereby differentiating civilian and militant factions. Others have postulated that not all the crumbling edifices unearthed on the frontier are those of the engineers, but that some belong to other species seeded by or crossbred with them. If that is the case, then these civilizations have likewise died out. And pointing to the enormous fossilized remains of the so-called space jockey specimen reportedly witnessed by 2 starfighter crews and colonists from Hadley's Hope, some xenoanthropologists suggest the engineers based their biochemical technology on creatures greater than themselves, strange beings of immense size replete with pachydermic proboscis. However, since the specimen in question was unfortunately destroyed and there are no engineers around to ask, all of this is merely hearsay and conjecture. Architecture. Engineer architecture is on a grand scale with monolithic stone citadels, impressive arches, and massive domes. Most engineer installations will have at least one giant stone head. It is believed these heads are meant to represent one of 6 elders of their civilization, intellectuals, artists, and wise men. Their culture appears to be steeped in both the sciences and the arts. In addition to their biotechnological wonders, beautifully painted murals and bas-reliefs of bizarre alien creatures adorn the walls of their innermost sanctums. While not yet understood, their computer interfaces work on a combination of musical initiation plus the manipulation of depressible hieroglyphic symbols and rubbery egg-shaped control modules. There is evidence of terraforming at many of their sites via a method that company scientists so far cannot explain. Vast underground hangars are hypothesized to hold the remains of their star-faring juggernauts, although all such hangars discovered thus far have been vacant. Engineer flute. Music is the crux of engineer society. It has been hypothesized that they can see melodies as colors, shapes, and words. As such, music is key to operating most of their technology. Different flutes function as keys to unlock different doors and technology, and playing different tones on these flutes will trigger different functions, such as turning on the lights, starting a juggernaut, plotting a navigational course, or even unlocking a biosuit. An android, or human, possessing a particular talent for music could conceivably learn to whistle the appropriate tones to activate and operate the engineer technology. But it is an exceedingly difficult skill to master. Engineer Biosuit. It has been theorized that these pressure suits increase the wearer's strength, help them to process toxins, and act as armor against ballistic weaponry. Helmeted, one of these suits will keep an engineer alive in the vacuum of space. Scientists believe an engineer could survive in a toxic environment for at least 1 hour sans helmet, as the biosuit will breathe for them. The biosuit also acts as an advanced medkit, repairing damage to the engineer's body and providing the wearer with limited sustenance. Engineer rebreather. Usually used by engineers when placed in cryosleep, these bioengineered masks insert a tube down the wearer's throat and feed oxygen directly into their lungs. Sarcophagi. Resembling large, translucent coffins, these engineer hypersleep tubes can keep someone alive in suspended animation for centuries, if not millennia. An engineer rebreather must be worn in the chamber. Holography. Engineers record everything within their installations using a memory gel that coats the interior walls and ceiling. When the proper electrostatic currents are channeled through the gel, hieroglyphic playback will occur in the actual environment, producing fuzzy blue particle representations of various recorded events. Most evidence of the engineer's past actions have come from such recordings. Orrery. Engineer holographic maps of the galaxy are extremely detailed and interactive, allowing viewers to simply pluck a photonic representation of a world out of the air and have its statistics and coordinates feed directly into a navigational system. Orreries are located on the bridge of an engineer ship and sometimes serve as observatories or command centers within engineer installations. Juggernauts. These massive, asymmetrical horseshoe-shaped craft appear more grown than built. Each ship contains at least one massive cargo bay with an ampule delivery system. See ampule entry below. These ships usually have 4 to 8 hypersleep chambers arranged around the central dais on the upper level of the ship's center. In the middle of this dais is a retractable pilot's seat that interfaces with the pilot and makes them one with the ship. The entire chamber can be used to display a map of the galaxy, homing in on any world or system and charting a course to the desired location. Juggernauts are theorized to be war machines or bombers of some kind, and are capable of FTL speeds that rival our own. Mother Juggernaut. Colossal craft shaped like a scorpion's tail. Engineer motherships are defensive docking stations that hover over and protect major engineer installations and cities. Juggernauts and other engineer craft can dock with a mothership to replenish their energies and supplies. Dreadnoughts. While none have yet to be seen, dreadnoughts are hypothetical engineer battleships. Partially translated hieroglyphics seem to indicate that these twisted, knot-shaped craft are larger than juggernauts but still follow the same design philosophy. Dreadnoughts are believed to be extremely weaponized and FTL capable. Steatite ampules. Metallic storage containers, roughly a half a meter tall. These urns each contain 4 glass conical containers, each of which, in turn, contains a strain of the engineer's greatest creation, the genetic accelerant, called Agent A0-3959X.91-15. Hermetically sealed, the urns are designed to release the black goo in response to pressure, temperature, and other environmental changes. These are exceptionally dangerous and should be avoided. So much has already been built upon and expanded after the release of Prometheus and the accompanying Weyland-Yutani report. It all began with the original film and questions Ridley Scott couldn't quite let go. When it came time to introduce the engineers to the series, the driving force was always the mystery of who was the space jockey. This had always captured the imagination of Scott, enough to have him return to the series to make Prometheus all these decades later. He had remarked on several occasions that he believed the derelict ship was carrying the alien eggs in its cargo as advanced weapons. Here's what he had to say in the 1999 DVD commentary of Alien. I always wanted to go back and make an Alien 5 or 6 where we find out where they came from and go there, and answer the question, who are they? Mars is too close, so they can't be gods of war. But the theory was, in my head, this was an aircraft carrier, a battle wagon of a civilization, and the eggs were cargo, which were essentially weapons. Sort of like a large form of bacteriological stroke, biomechanoid warfare. Years forward into the development of Prometheus, this concept was retained. Scott teamed with writer Jonathan Spates, who introduced the idea of the engineers as we would come to know them. Spates was tasked with fleshing out the origins of these beings and bringing them into the prequel story. Here's what he had to say in the documentary Furious Gods, The Making of Prometheus. I'd never thought about it before, but I discovered instantly that I had all these opinions, and I just started mouthing off in the room. I got very opinionated. Well, you'd have to go back to the shipwreck from which it all sprang. And you'd have to look at that dead giant, the space jockey. The dead giant in the chair with the elephantine proboscis, ribcage. What do you do if you're going to go make a movie about that guy and his comrades on some big starship? They look ridiculous. They'll be unintentionally funny. We won't relate to them because they're not people. They're going to speak some language we don't understand. How do you do it? And it seemed very plain to me that the only way you could go dive into the story of the space jockeys is if their story is ultimately ours. If their story led back to us. They needed to be intrinsically involved in the human story, in human history, and I thought, in our evolution. Further into the scripting stages, Damon Lindelof was assigned to make revisions, and he expressed some conflicted feelings about the origins of the engineers. From the Prometheus commentary track. This is clearly an idea that Ridley had, the idea that what if the space jockeys were humanoid and created mankind in their own image but were vastly evolved? It was obviously present and proliferated in John Spaihts' draft and something that they all loved. And when I first read John's draft, it was a surprise to me. I didn't know how I felt about it at first. And I feel that probably many fans take issue with this idea. It's a controversial idea because anything in a prequel that essentially recasts your understanding of the original movie has the opportunity to lessen that movie, and therefore it's a risk. So the idea that I always thought of that the space jockey as some crazy kind of alien, but the idea that there was a human face underneath it sort of upset me. And then, after it upset me, I was like, well, this is cool. I didn't expect it. And as much as it might piss people off, I admire the risk. And it was like the first thing that I read in John's draft where I said, okay, they're going for something here. They're not afraid of pissing people off based on sort of taking the first movie one step further. The idea that the space jockey is essentially just a big evolved extraterrestrial humanoid is a cool idea to me, and it makes a lot of sense. If they're the ones who created life on Earth, why not make humans look like them, except slightly smaller? Many artists collaborated on the design of these engineers. What should they be meant to look like? Production designer Arthur Max recalled conversations with Ridley Scott in the Furious Gods documentary. We got Neville Page involved. Neville specializes in creature design, and we introduced him to the physical anatomy that was a brief from Ridley that it shouldn't be like a bodybuilder musculature. It should be like a classical statuary. When you look at them, they're very much more compact and less overdeveloped, but exaggerated in every detail. And so we tried to express those and overlay them with this classical veneer to make them godlike. He wanted them to be, in a strange sort of way, beautiful and not frightening. From Neville Page. I spent a lot of time developing the ultimate head, which was classical art-driven. We kept looking at Da Vinci's work for that bulky, husky body, the strong nose, the small lips. The names thrown around were David, the David sculpture, the Statue of Liberty, and Elvis Presley. And when you hear that as a brief, you're like, what the hell am I going to do? I understood, though. As you look at those three images, you go, oh, I get it. It's that specific mouth, that nose, and those eyes. With the designs in place, and the decision to present these beings using practical effects, not CGI, there seemed to be only one actor best suited for the role. Ian White, the actor, stuntman, and former basketball player standing at a commanding 7 feet 2 inches in height. Fans are sure to know that White was no stranger to the series before Prometheus. He had played the lead Predator roles in both Alien vs. Predator movies. And as an interesting piece of trivia I'm sure I've brought up before, he's been the actor to perform as both the engineer and the Predator who faces down the founder of the Wayland Company. One played by Lance Henriksen in AVP, the other Guy Pearce in Prometheus, and ends up killing both. It's been well over a decade since the release of Prometheus, and I think the engineers still are something that, as Lindelof puts it, pisses fans off. The engineers, as well as the pathogen, have become so entwined in the Alien lore now that it has changed the way we think about the series and the Alien itself. Many fans lament this, and many embrace it, believing it to have opened up the series to new possibilities. I do find Spaihts' comments about a literal translation of the space jockey interesting, though. Had it gone in a different direction, would such an interpretation not be believable? Would it be unintentionally funny? We do have some reference. When Dark Horse Comics first acquired the rights to the Aliens license, they wasted no time including the race of jockeys into their very first storyline. The inclusion, I felt, was very successful, and the role these creatures played was fascinating. Pairing that with another Dark Horse story, Aliens Apocalypse, which shares some similar ideas with Prometheus, I think it proves that these jockeys could be interpreted literally and still be effective. That is, in the form of comics at least. If we are seeing them in a live-action movie, then maybe that is a different story, and maybe Spaihts was right to trust his instinct and stray away from that. But is there room for both these versions in the larger scheme of things? Could both of these interpretations exist? The RPG certainly hints at that, and there's still so much we don't know about these engineers. Even from what has already been presented to us, there's a fair amount originally intended for use in the films that was originally left out. Prometheus's opening scene, for example, was initially a little bit different from what was presented theatrically. An extended version of the scene reveals that the engineer, who consumes the pathogen and falls into the waters below, did not come there alone. Other cloaked engineers were present, including elders of this race, suggesting that this is a more known ritual within their culture. On the optional commentary track for this scene, editor Pietro Scalea explains that the scene was scaled back for both timing and to retain some mystery when it comes to the engineers and their practices. He also mentions that the scene was even longer in different versions that have yet been seen publicly. He stated, "There was actually an older version where the sacrifice itself was longer, where the older, wiser engineer speaks to the young man. They were speaking an ancient language similar to Sanskrit. An earlier version of the Prometheus script contained this moment and describes how it may have played out in the film. Now, one of the standing engineers, he seems older, kneels beside one in the stream, gently puts one hand on his shoulder, and with the other hand, he offers a small box. It looks like it's made of black glass. The kneeling engineer looks at it. After a moment, he takes the box. And now, he speaks. Primitive yet complex. Clicks and talks, not unlike an aboriginal bushman. The Elder. Let your body become the dirt, your blood become the waters, and may your soul come their way back to us. And even though there are no subtitles, we need no translation. They are saying goodbye." The Elder rises, joins the other engineer. One last look between the three. A sense of importance. Something meaningful is about to happen here. Deleted footage involving the engineer and Wayland near the film's finale also expands on the engineers a slight bit further. In the extended scene, the engineer actually speaks, and its words are translated by David. It asks Wayland why he is there, and what makes him think he is entitled to eternal life. In further dialogue, not revealed until later in another extended scene, David hints at the engineer's homeworld when speaking to Shaw. "What did he say? Where did he come from?" Shaw asks. David replies, "There is no direct translation, but several of your ancient cultures had a word similar to it. Paradise." Prometheus, of course, ends with Shaw intending to find out where the engineers came from and to get the answers to her burning questions. This journey was tragically cut short for Shaw, and Paradise was lost. We still have yet to see the origin of the engineers, but we do see Planet 4, another one of their creations. Life in their own image. They can create, but maybe are not the gods Shaw once thought they were. When we look at the additional media complementing Alien Covenant, specifically the short film Alien Advent and the Alien Covenant novelization, we begin to demystify the engineers in a way. Here are some of David's words from Alien Advent. "There was so much potential on this world, wasted by gods that feared their own might. They convinced themselves that sacrifice cleansed them of their sins. But in the end, they were like me. Creators. Beings that understood you must give life to both the wolf and the lamb. But then they tried to banish the wolf and undo their creation. So I took their secrets for myself." In the novelization, he spoke of the engineer's ship. "I was never able to determine its ultimate purpose. To some it might be said to have carried instruments of destruction, to others instruments of creation. If you look at it appropriately, they are one and the same. Among humans, Hindu mythology comes nearest to explaining it. Consider the Trimurti, or, if you prefer, simply Shiva. But the engineers were not gods, just organics, like humans, only more advanced. That, ultimately, was their downfall." Finally, it is worth mentioning that long after the Aliens comics line, Dark Horse Comics did in fact introduce the engineers into their later stories. This was after the release of Prometheus, but before Alien Covenant, so their inclusion is carefully considered, with not too many earth-shattering changes or revelations that could affect the then-upcoming sequel. But there are very interesting things to consider with the engineers in those comics. There are two major storylines, Fire and Stone and Life and Death, which cross over everything alien-related Dark Horse had the licenses for at the time. The worlds of Prometheus, Aliens, Predator, and Aliens vs. Predator all interconnect in a large, very ambitious crossover. These stories are actually set many years after the events of Prometheus, in fact, approximately 40 years after the events of Aliens and Alien 3. So we can gather that during everything in between, the engineers were still out there somewhere, still destined to meet with their creations once again. In these stories, we see a team of explorers investigate the moon LV-223, as well as a platoon of colonial marines who find themselves there within roughly the same period of time. Much has changed since mankind last visited. It has grown lush plant life and several abnormal and very dangerous creatures, all seemingly having resulted through contact with the Engineer's pathogen. We learn that the Engineers have returned to destroy all the life on the site, seeing these creations as abominations. A newly discovered Engineer ship, long abandoned, contained what appeared to be an Engineer laboratory, the origin of this life on the moon. Also present, and also targeted for extermination by the Engineers, were the Xenomorphs, which had overrun this site. As the characters in Fire and Stone observe, they've been cleaning up the planet, killing all the black goo monsters and the Xenomorphs, ripping them apart and then studying them. I think they're responsible for the biomes of many planets. Life on Earth as we know it. It was probably different before they came. They made us in their image, like Engineers. Either their culture is immeasurably ancient, or, given their level of advancement, it is not beyond reason to think they can navigate time, as well as space. If we are their children, they clearly have no love for us. They kill us on sight, like lice. I guess we didn't turn out the way they wanted. Additionally, the comic storylines introduce some of the weaponry used by the Engineers. There is a giant rifle, which opens up and has a blast powerful enough to completely neutralize its targets. Slightly smaller guns are also used by the Engineers, apparently equipped within their biosuits and seemingly made from the same material. The Fire and Stone and Life and Death comics really are quite something. They very successfully combined all of these worlds into an engaging storyline with some great moments. If you ever wanted to see an Engineer face off against a Predator, for example, then these are definitely worth checking out, and I think they're definitely worth exploring in further detail on this channel in the future. These two runs would be the only instances of the Engineers appearing in the comics, though. It's been a few years now since Marvel has acquired the license to all things Aliens and Predator, and we've yet to see the return of the Engineers in any of their stories. Maybe a time will come where that changes. Maybe not. I've heard different things from different fans. As mentioned, there are plenty of fans who just plain don't like the Engineers and the Black Goo, and feel their entanglement in the overall series has led it astray. Others feel the opposite. They want more of the Engineers. They've already been established, so let's delve deeper. Let's explore further. Let's get some definitive answers as to how they relate to the space jockey from the 1979 film. Let's see if they are, in fact, capable of things such as time travel. Let's see different possibilities from their different experimentations. As far as my own opinion goes, I absolutely feel that they could and should go further into the Engineer's story. Specifically, I would like to see them explore and confirm the theory of the coexistence of the Engineer species along with the ancient jockeys. That is something that just makes sense to me. If humans can follow the work of the gods and create their own life in the form of androids, and if the androids, mainly David as an example, can follow the work of the Engineers, then surely the Engineers could be following the work of other beings we have yet to fully comprehend. Not that this would need to be the focus of an entire movie, but maybe some part of the plot that circles back to what was set up in Prometheus. I think if something like that was included, then maybe, just maybe, fans would go a little bit easier on Prometheus by knowing that there was something else that influenced the Engineers. But then again, there's nothing stopping you right now from believing this. I'd also like to see more of the Engineer culture in general. I think a comic or a novel exploring their history and their culture would be incredibly fascinating. What exactly were their rituals? What other species have they created or influenced? What exactly were they expecting with mankind, and what disappointed them so that they felt the need to destroy us? Dr. Elizabeth Shaw, tragically, never got her answers, but it doesn't mean we still can't get ours. There's a whole world of possibility that is yet to be tapped into, and it feels like a waste to me to just set these characters aside. Without a doubt, I am eager to see more. But where do you stand? Let me know in the comments below. As always, I'd like to thank you very much for watching today. Please be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and be sure to subscribe to the channel to keep up with the latest from Alien Theory. My very special thanks today goes out to Nicholas Butta, our Weyland-Yutani executive, and Gregory Ford, the Patreon Hive Praetorian. And of course, my very, very special thanks to Lady Anne in the Ellen Ripley Tier of Excellence. If you'd like to join the Hive and support the channel, check out my Patreon page for further information. In the meantime, you can follow me on social media. Follow @alien_theory on X, formerly Twitter. Follow @alientheoryyt on Facebook and Instagram for more. And, until next time, this is Alien Theory, signing off.